Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, whichever the case is for all of you listening everywhere out there in the crazy world that is the planet Earth. This is Vestiges After Dark, and I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this June 1st, 2021. And tonight, we bring back Michael and Marti Parry for Mediumship Part 2. There just wasn't enough time last time to talk about everything that there was to talk about. And so we're going to continue the discussion from the last episode they were on, diving into more about their work and some of the revelations that they were able to discern through that work. It's a great show, and hopefully we'll get some of you to call in and ask some questions. The number will be up on the screen shortly. Don't go away. Well, hello, everyone. I hope everyone out there is having a wonderful, wonderful day. I've had a very relaxing day. I did some work, though, and it was at least successful, and I always consider that a win. And I was able to take a nap this afternoon, which is really like a double win. I hardly ever get an opportunity for that. So I'm feeling refreshed tonight, and I'm very excited about tonight's show. Before we get started, though, just a quick reminder. You remember that you can listen to this show on any platform that indexes podcasts. So there's the primary ones like iTunes, of course, and Google Podcasts has us up there, I believe. But you can also listen to us direct on Spreaker, which is our primary podcast service. Everything that goes out to all of those indexes. Or indices, I should say, comes from Spreaker first. But when we're listening live, it is Blog Talk Radio if you're audio only. And then there's YouTube if you want to watch me sit here at my desk talking to all of you. But the sound is better on YouTube, so I would definitely recommend that you listen to YouTube if you have the preference. It is also better for smart TVs typically, but we're on iHeartRadio. We're on all the platforms. So be sure to, whichever platform you use, or if you use multiple platforms, be sure to like us and subscribe and giving us ratings wherever they are asked for, because that always helps this show. Even if you can't give to the ministry to help the show and support it financially, this is a way that you can support the show in other ways to help it to grow and become bigger than what it is. So please, at the very least, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It hasn't been active very long, so I think we're doing pretty good at over 730 subscribers. That's not bad for a channel that's fairly new. So I'm pleased with all of that, but get the word out there, retweet when you see my tweets on Twitter, if you see my posts on Facebook, wherever you're connected to us, retweet it, repost it, let people know that this show exists, because I think it's a wonderful way of being able to communicate with all of you, and where we can get beyond some of the limitations and boundaries that exist with television, being on television shows, or, giving lectures, or, the limitations even of the Mass, because I know a lot of you do watch on the Nicolaitan channel on YouTube. You watch our live Masses, and, I can't interact with you when I'm doing that. But, we'll probably have more interactive events coming up here once things settle down. And, but in the meantime, we have this show. Okay, so we've got some great shows coming up on the schedule. You can go to the YouTube channel to see what those are. Be sure to set your reminders. YouTube has a great reminder system. Lots of options for you, and we appreciate all of you for participating in this show. Also, tonight, these kinds of shows, discussion shows, Vestiges After Dark is basically conversational. I don't do a formal talk show. I'm not a broadcaster. I did not go to school to become a broadcaster. I just enjoy these kinds of discussions, and I know a lot of you do too. And I don't really get satisfied by a lot of the content that's out there that deals with shows on the paranormal or metaphysics or esotericism. So I thought, now that we're in the day and age where anybody can have a talk show, let's do a podcast. So that's kind of the mindset here, although I've been podcasting for many, many years, more than 10 years actually. It was always done in an informal way. Like I said, I'm not a broadcaster. I didn't go to school to do this. But I feel that there's definitely something to be said for having this kind of interaction, but doing it from more of a discussion-based foundation rather than trying to make this professional talk show. And that gives us the freedom to do whatever we want and go in any direction we want. So tonight, if you have a question or a comment for our guests or for us, you are free to call into this show at any time you want. But understand, we typically get the discussion going first, and then we'll start towards the middle of the show, start taking your calls. But it all depends upon the direction that our conversation goes. So the number to call is 516-453-0138. Okay, I'm going to put that up on the screen there so that you can see it if you're watching on YouTube. That's 516-453-0138. And you can call in now, and it'll go into the queue. Just don't hang up, or you'll lose your place in the queue. Okay, and we would love to hear from you. That's what makes this show so much fun, is that there's interaction, and any one of you can call in and talk to us, and we can see what you have to say. And if you have a question, we'll try to answer it. If you have a comment, we'll listen to it. If you have a story, we'll listen to that too. Lots of options, okay? So that number, 516-453-0138. It's always the same number from show to show. So, write that down and keep it next to you when you listen to the show. And then when something comes up that you want to talk to us about, give us a call. Look, we're not going to bite your head off. This is an informal show. Let's just sit back, relax, and talk. And Sister Mary Joan also will be following the chat. It's harder for me because I'm doing all these things. I don't have an engineer, so I'm doing all the engineering of the show myself, as well as being able to communicate, as the host of the show. So I don't really have a lot of time to watch the chat, although sometimes I do during the break. And we have a break at the top of the hour. So that's another opportunity for us to just get recalibrated and get ready for the meat of what we're talking about tonight. But if you have questions and you don't want to call in, hopefully you do want to call in, but if you'd rather just ask your question in the chat, you can do that too. Sister Mary Joan will be monitoring it, but there's no guarantees your question will be taken because we give the chat room last priority. First priority goes to callers, okay? But Sister Mary Joan will definitely be watching that, and if there's something that catches her eye, she might bring it on the air to our attention. So Sister Mary Joan is, of course, with us tonight. And how are you doing tonight, Sister?
Good evening, everyone. I'm well. Looking forward to our returning guests. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Sister Mary Joan has a new microphone, a new headset system, so she'll probably sound better to you tonight than she has in the past. You already sound better to me, and I like this. So yes, let's continue in this direction.
Duly noted. Duly noted.
She was saying that she had a $5 peer that she was using before, so that might be part of the static issues we were having.
Yeah. Don't get skimpy on the earbuds, people.
No, definitely. When it comes to audio equipment, the more expensive it is, typically the better it is, and quality definitely matters. Price definitely matters when it comes to audio equipment. You don't have to go crazy. Like this microphone, I think is extremely good, and I don't think I spent more than $100 and something on it. It might not have even been that much, but it's definitely better than most that we could be using, or most of the cheaper stuff. So it's always a good idea to have good equipment, particularly when you're doing radio like this. So grateful that you have better sound, Sister. We can hear you better now.
Yeah, I had to go digging for them, but I found them.
Okay. Well, that's great. We didn't really get too many things coming in, questions from the last week. I always like to kind of start the show off with any kind of questions that we've seen, and I can't say that I've seen anything that was really worth bringing, something that was so important that I need to bring it to the entire community's attention. I did see something here on the Nicolean network that maybe it was worth giving a little bit more information on. It was a person that asked, I always give these anonymously, but somebody asked me 2 questions this week. There's a section on the Nicolean network where you can ask Bishop Bryan whatever you want. And so there's 2 that came in, and I answered them in text on the network, but I'd like to maybe give a little bit more background before we completely get started here. Somebody was asking about redemptive suffering, and she said, Bishop and sisters, would you be willing to help me understand this concept and or suggest books to help me? If the topic is too much to cover here, would you be open to discuss it on your Vestiges After Dark show? So that's what I'm doing right now. She has Crohn's disease, and it's become severe and is now disabled, and spent 77 days as an inpatient at the clinic. She doesn't understand how her suffering could help someone else's redemption, which is, of course, a common theme in Catholicism, as well as Christianity in general. But mostly it's more of a Catholic notion, this idea of redemptive suffering. And then she says, another aspect of this topic I struggle with is voluntary suffering. I may be taking the term voluntary too literal. I don't understand how I could volunteer to suffer instead of another. Thank you for your time. So voluntary suffering, I think she's referring to people that actually undergo trials of suffering in order to use this as a means of cultivating grace for a particular intention. There are certain saints that did this, and there are people in the modern era that do practice this, or at least try to. There's always religious, you could say religious, there's a religious foundation to it, which is, of course, the Passion of Jesus Christ. And it's about emulating Jesus Christ, and the merits that he won for us by his suffering is something that we can practice to a degree in our own life, but never at the expense of good health, and never at the expense of what is safe. There's a difference between offering one's natural suffering up for an intention, and that's very different than causing yourself to suffer because you think you're sinful and you need to cleanse yourself of those sins. That's not healthy, and that's actually sinful behavior. So redemptive suffering really is just about connecting us with the suffering of Jesus Christ, using the natural suffering that every human being deals with on this world. It's a way of being able to offer that up for a particular intention, usually for the redemption of someone else, someone who may need that type of grace that suffering can produce. And suffering does strengthen us, and it does create an actual grace that can be conferred on others. There's a lot of history in the church of this, a lot of saints that practice this. It's very successful. It's not a necessary thing. Prayer is just as good, a sacrifice. But, that's really what it is. I hope that answers the question better. But, certainly one would not want to seek suffering just for the sake of using it as a spiritual tool. That's a bit extreme, and it's discouraged in the church. The other question that came up was Nostradamus' predictions and the Catholic Church, and whether his prophecies were feared or respected. And they would also like my thoughts on Nostradamus. And this was the other question that came in this week. And I answered this one as well, but I'll just mention it here. And maybe we'll talk about that. That's the starting point for tonight's conversation with our guests. But the Catholic Church has never recognized his predictions as prophecies. Prophecy is a very specific thing in Christianity. It is not fortune telling. It's not predicting the future. It's not prognostication. Prophecy is a direct communication with God where something is revealed that may include information about the future, but is not limited to that. And so prophecies are always about communicating with God directly. The Roman Catholic Church has never recognized that Nostradamus was doing that. He might have been prognosticating, but the problem I have with Nostradamus, and this gets into the second question, how I feel about it, the problem I have is I feel it is nothing more than literary pareidolia. Okay, I think that his quatrains were written so vaguely that you literally could see anything from your current time in his prophecies. I'm not terribly impressed with the lot of it. And I think it's very subjective, too subjective, almost to the point that it's not really much better than a sun sign astrological reading in the newspaper. That any astrologer is going to tell you that that's pure garbage. Real astrology has to be done with an actual birth time, a birth date, a birth time preferably, and the location of birth to generate a complete chart that looks at all the planets, all of their positions in relation to each other. It's not just your sun sign. It's about all these other things, and not just your planets, but also the transits that are moving and creating relationships to your natal planets. Okay, the newspaper astrology doesn't include the horoscope, they call it. The horoscope does not include any of that. All right, so it's just vague enough that it can almost be applied to anyone, whether you're the sign that they're talking about or not. I feel that Nostradamus is very much in that category. Now, our guest tonight might have a different view on this. But, what they do is not really what Nostradamus did. He used to do a basic type of scrying and was almost like a remote viewer in some ways. At least that's how it's described, though that would not have been a term he would have been familiar with. But at the same time, he might have been prognosticating something, but how he wrote it down, and they have reasons for that, saying that, it was because he was trying to write in code so they couldn't figure him out and kill him, because that's what they did back then to people that did things like that, which is probably true. But at the same time, it's really something that is so vague. I don't know if it's terribly useful, and it's not specific enough to be able to go back and say, all right, he was on to something. And a lot of ones that people quote in memes and on the internet aren't even really Nostradamus quatrains. They're just things that have been attributed to him that some modern person made up in hindsight to make it look like it came true. So you got to be very careful. If you're not reading directly from his writings, then I wouldn't trust it, because a lot of the memes are fake out there. But hopefully that answers the questions tonight and gives us a starting point, a launching point for tonight's show. Last time we had Marti and Michael on, we were just talking, very, very well, just in tangents about the various things that they do and the work that they do. And tonight, I'd like to actually kind of ask them a bit about Nostradamus, but also if in their interactions with spirits, if they've been told things about the future, or if things have been revealed that they would like to share with us that might be helpful to the world in much the same way that Nostradamus, I guess one could argue, tried to do or did, depending upon your position. But let's get started there. So let's welcome back to the show, first of all, Marti and Michael Parry. Welcome back.
Oh, hi, guys.
Hi. Hey, you
Hi.
two.
Thanks for having us back on, and hello, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming back on, guys.
Absolutely. It's such a wonderful thing to have you guys here. We had such a good time last time, and the audience really loved it. I never heard the end of it, really. I mean, everyone kept telling me day after day how great this episode was. So I'm so happy and privileged to have you back on and to continue where we left off. And so, tonight, the topic seems to start off with Nostradamus. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think he was a kook? Do you think he was misunderstood? Do you think he really was doing something there? There's substance to it? Or how do you view Nostradamus?
Oh, my gosh.
I think the main point that you said was that it's too vague to be useful. That's what's always bothered me about it. It's like, you can look back and say, oh, well, that's what that meant, but it didn't really do anything useful for the future. If it,
It never changed anything.
Right.
Right.
So, I mean, no one used it to, use the information to alter anything.
Well,
it's not like,
actually,
that guy from...
No, do we?
Well, we don't know.
Because they might have changed it, and therefore it was not valid anymore.
Oh, you've just got to be just so...
Now we're getting deep. We're getting deep already. She has a point, though. She definitely has a point.
Well, I guess that's a good question.
The thing with Hister related to Hitler, if they thought that was Hitler, it's not like no one tried to kill Hitler. There were over a dozen...
His own people did.
Yeah, a dozen attempts on his life, so it's not like anyone didn't try to kill him. But, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I know he was a healer, and, he did do a lot of, things that were a bit ahead of their time for his day.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, we come up with the same thing in what we do. Is there's so many mediums out there that say that they do what we do, but they are so vague that it'll fit with anybody.
Well, I could think of some really big names. I won't mention them because I don't want to disparage anyone.
Too.
But I think we all know who we're thinking about.
Now there's so many.
Yeah, and there are so many. Well, there are so many. That is true. And it seems like the bigger the name, the more likely that's exactly what they're doing, a sort of cold reading. But I guess that begs the next question that I have for you. Are you able to go in and find someone you want to talk to, or are you just randomly at the mercy of whoever shows up?
I think what happens is that there's a need or a purpose that somebody like's been designated. Like when we were trying to help this lady with her autistic son, and the way it all happened, it was I think it was just meant to be. So I've talked to Albert Einstein a number of times now, and I started talking to her about him. I said, I just right before we even started the session, and she said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're saying that." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I came to you and wondered if you mentioned him, then maybe we could get some communication from him about autism."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, that's interesting. So we committed to doing some sessions with her on a regular basis, and she turned it into a book. And during the course of the conversations over, I think it was over about a year.
It was what, 23 sessions?
Yeah,
Like that?
and we had a lot of interesting communicators, and it wasn't just about autism. So I'm just talking about this really to answer your question. I told her, although you want to know about autism and what's causing the problems with your son, they may talk about other things. I don't know what they're going to talk about until they come in. And some of the communicators were great. I mean, FDR came and spoke, and one of the people he mentioned was a woman called Missy. Well, I know nothing about FDR. I don't know anything about him. Well, Missy was his secretary that he was, he was having an affair with.
Mm-hmm.
So when they tell me things like that, then I know I'm really talking to them. They give me facts and details that people don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. The person sitting with me doesn't know. But then they get into things. I mean, they talked about Fukushima with us 3 months before it happened.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
We knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
They told me it was going to be an attack, and there would be an earthquake. It would destroy a nuclear power plant, and it would be worse than Chernobyl. There would be a tsunami, and I knew it was in the Pacific, but I didn't know exactly where.
And I had drawn the
And she drew power plants, like
with a crack on it,
with like one of the cooling towers with a crack down it.
Yes.
So we knew that this was going to happen, and Marti knew that it was in March, and that was 3 months. We were doing this in January, I think, and so she knew it was going to happen in March. And all we could do was wait, because who did we know that would believe us? How could we prevent it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This is the problem. If you're not somebody really who people listen to, then you're who can you tell? You know what I mean?
Right.
However, we did do with we had a feeling, or we had gotten communication that there was going to be an assassination, and it had to do with the president, who was at the time was Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So we were thinking there was going to be an assassination attempt on Obama.
Yeah.
And
so we did an interview with an FBI agent to get more information for him, and all the information came in, and I have the recording of it, so I could play it to someone, and he would probably, if I asked him to, come forward and back up that really happened. That's him on the tape.
Mm-hmm.
He's retired now, so I'd have to try and find him.
Mm-hmm.
But when I told him everything from some of the people talking to me, and one of them was a detective friend of his who had committed suicide, who was talking to him, and he passed it all on to his friend in the Secret Service, and everything I'd said, and it all happened exactly as I said it would happen, and the exact time, a week before. So I said that it would happen around 3 o'clock on Sunday, and this was about a week ahead. It was like a Tuesday, I think I did it with him. And the following Sunday at 3:10, something like that, Washington time, that's when the assassination of Osama bin Laden took place.
so it wasn't Obama, it was Osama.
Osama.
But the
Interesting.
president,
Yeah.
but the president assassinated. Who would think Obama's going to kill Osama? Obama, Osama. There's one letter difference.
Yeah.
I can see where there was some confusion.
Yeah, well, you could see. You wouldn't, in your wildest imaginings, think Obama's going to kill Osama, would you?
No. That would not have how I would have
basically-
taken that either. Yeah. Yeah.
No. So this is this is part of the problem that you deal with when you're talking to people that you don't know. They don't know the communicator. They don't know this is a future thing. So there's no way to figure it out. The Secret Service agent got back to him and he said, that's my friend, the Secret Service agent, was very impressed. He said, you might get a visit.
You know too much.
That's
You know
the
too much.
problem.
So, and then the weird thing was, several months later, about 6 months later, we met this lady who came to a session. She was a special agent. She had a Glock strapped to her leg. And she actually asked us after the session if we'd work for the CIA in the remote viewing.
Interesting.
And she gave us a card. Yeah. Now, that's long been said that they stopped that program, but trust me, they
Early 90s, it was supposed to be done, but we know better.
No, they never stopped
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
They never.
Yeah, we know
stopped it.
better.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, can we find people on the other side? Sort of yes and no. We can request.
Yeah, people like Albert Einstein, the guy that came to the session that day to see us, had actually asked Albert to come to answer questions for him. So he did request him to come, and he did.
So, do you find it easier to connect with someone you've already spoken to before, or does it not matter?
No, it doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
It's simply it makes no difference. I'm more familiar with them, obviously. There's a familiarity there. That's about it.
Right.
I kind of know them. You meet someone and you sit down with them for an hour. You get to know them a little bit, and you spend. But it doesn't make any difference.
It really makes the difference on how good a communicator that person on the other side is. So that's the difference. And sometimes the first time that they do communicate, they might not be that good if they've never done it before.
Well, it just depends who they are. I find that a lot of the best communicators were radio operators, and or that in life they were just really good communicators.
Yeah.
So many of them are very quiet. There's a lot of dads that come in, the old school guys, and a lot of them just weren't big talkers, and they don't say much.
Right.
So they're like pulling teeth with them.
And then we had the mumbler.
Yeah, so it's just it just depends who you're dealing with and what they want to say, and
Yeah, when you cross over, you're not automatically all-knowing, and
I did have a communication with the Pope on one occasion.
The most
John
recent
Paul,
John Paul II?
John Paul.
Okay.
Oh, that was my grandma's Pope.
I really liked him. My mentor had a hand in healing him when he got shot. He thought he was a good man. So when I saw him, he was in a... I have it on video somewhere. I've got to find the video because we film all of our events over the years. So I know I've got it somewhere. I just can't remember the date. So I've got to sit down and go through a 3-hour video, every 3-hour video to find it.
Right.
But when I started the group, and there were about 50 people there, I see this, he called himself a priest. I called him a priest. And I think that's how he viewed himself, a priest. I think he was a humble man, and I always felt like he viewed himself as a priest. So I see this priest walking around the audience, and he's wearing a mitre, so I know he's not a priest. He's like a bishop or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this guy, and I told everybody, there's a priest here with a mitre on, and he's going around blessing you all. And then we get into it. We get into the session, and I see this old man, white hair. He's Polish, and he's standing behind this lady. And I thought maybe it was her dad, because he said father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 So I thought he meant he was her dad.
Right.
And I said, your father Polish? No, she says. I says, is your grandfather Polish? Because he's an old-looking guy. No. She's looking at her husband. No, he doesn't know. Well, his name's John, he's telling me. No, doesn't understand that. Then I say Paul. Then he says Paul. No, doesn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Then he tells me he lived in Italy. He's a European guy. He's Polish, but he lives in Italy, I said to her. This whole thing goes. This woman just doesn't get it. She's not understanding who this is.
Yeah.
I got right in her face, and I said to her, look, this guy is saying hello to you. You don't know who he is? And she's like, no, I was getting so frustrated.
It's
So
a
she
Pope,
wrote
lady,
me a
it's
letter.
Pope.
Well, she wrote me a letter afterwards. She's driving home, and the light bulb went on in her head.
Mm.
She idolizes the Pope. If there was one person on earth she would want to speak with that died, it would be the Pope.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
She's a Catholic, hardcore. She has all of his books, all of his CDs, everything to do with him. And there he was saying hello to her. She completely blanked on me. It's like, and no one in that audience realizes that I spoke to the Pope, because I never was able to tell everyone. So no one in that group knew that I was talking to the Pope that night.
Wow.
Pretty funny, isn't it?
That is very funny. That's interesting how that happens for you. I mean, with Nostradamus.
Well, let me add one thing.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch for the Pope to know who I am, because my teacher wrote frequently to the Pope.
I see.
And had communication with the Pope, and my teacher was an archbishop. So, and he did. I don't know what he said in his letters to him, but I know that he respected him, and I know that he healed him when he got shot. So,
right.
It makes sense to me that the Pope wouldn't be hard for the Pope to find me. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And know what I'm doing.
Right.
See what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense, because there's a connection there.
Yeah, the connection, exactly.
But with like Nostradamus, I mean, you could, in theory, request to connect with him, right? And maybe ask him what he meant by some of his quatrains?
That's if he's not reborn. Maybe he's on Earth.
Okay.
There's where is he? How would you prove it was Nostradamus if Nostradamus came in?
Yeah.
What would he say to you that you wouldn't know? This is the thing. You've got to get evidence from a person. They've got to say. I don't know what I know about Nostradamus. If you waterboarded me and said, where did he live? I'd probably die, because I wouldn't be able to tell you. You know what I mean? So,
right, yes.
Like, it's like that. You've got to... If they're telling me things that I really don't know, and then in my mind I'm going, oh, that was cool. Oh, wow, that's neat.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's what it was so neat doing the book with our friend Laura, is that when Michael would get somebody, they would give him something that's really off the wall, that she is really good at finding out things. So she would like search the internet and find out, is there some connection here? And it would always prove out that it was correct.
Yeah,
so
she'd find it, and I'd be very impressed, actually, because said to her, "Wow," I said, "You're really good at finding stuff. That's amazing."
The thing like George Bernard Shaw presented Einstein with his.
Well, we talked about that.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, before, yeah.
Okay, I don't remember what we talked about. So tell us if we talk about the same thing.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I mean, there's always going to be different people listening, too, so, you know.
Well, Nostradamus, yeah. No, I don't know what to say about it. It's, like you say, it's very vague stuff. How can you know what this You know, the only quatrain that really sticks out for me is the one where the king gets shot in the eye with the arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool, but it's on the level of, like you say, seeing. You know, like looking into the future and seeing an event. Is he communicating with a specific person? No, we don't know, because no one's ever met. He doesn't say, "Oh, you know, Prince Henry V is telling me this, and this." Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
There's none of that. He's doing psychic stuff. He's doing. He's looking into the future, and if he is, it's in a language that we don't understand. Really.
Right.
Right.
You can't relate to it. You can't. You know, it's too vague for me. I watched we're supposed to have all died like 20 years ago, according to him.
Well, yeah,
all
that's
the
right.
prophecies, remember?
Well, I do.
We should all be dead by now.
Yeah, I do. So, yeah, I mean, that just goes to show that there's definitely, I think, a disconnect in comprehension at the very least. I mean, assuming there is actual, data there for the future, I don't think we're understanding it correctly enough to be able to say this is what it means. But at the same time, it also begs the question, if we do get a prediction from a viable, valid source that is kind of on the lines of prophecy, but let's not. I don't like using that word because it's religiously, it's misused in vernacular, and it has a very religious connotation, which is what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. But let's just say prognostication. Let's say you have a valid prognosticator who gives you a valid prediction. Is it possible to change the course of time if we have the information we need to know in order to make those changes? Is that something we can do, or are we sort of at the mercy of the timeline regardless? Are these things inevitable, and it's just talking about the inevitabilities of things? So if let's say, let me give you an example. Let's make it more concrete. Let's say a real viable source comes to you in these interactions that you're able to have, and you're able to confirm that it's valid. And the person says that the world's going to end on December 31st, 2025, and it's going to end by a very specific thing, like let's say. Well, let's make it more realistic. Let's say you get a prediction that says the world's going to end on December 31st, 2155, and it's going to be an asteroid that hits the Earth. Now, is it possible that if
there's nothing we could do about it?
Well, no, nothing we could do about it for us. But let's say you were able to get the powers that be to actually accept and believe that this is something that we need to look for. And then at some point, we're able to detect that there is indeed an asteroid out there that's heading our way.
And they do have the ability to divert it.
Yes,
right?
If we develop the technology by then to divert it.
100 years, hopefully.
Yeah. Can we change it, or would it be an inevitability? Would it happen no matter what?
I think, according to everything that I've understood so far, if you put enough, it depends on the effort and energy put out there whether you can alter something. I think you can alter things.
Okay.
Yeah, I do too. Otherwise, why bother at all?
That's true.
If we're just dictated by faith, then why do anything? It's going to happen no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you can alter things.
Okay.
I think, but it depends on the the effort put in by people.
Right.
You know, of course, you can never know whether something was changed or not, because if you intervened and you prevented something from happening, was that destiny? Is that what was supposed to happen?
Here we're getting deep again.
Yes,
Right.
It's kind of a philosophical
There's really no way
question.
to prove it.
Because think of it this way. Let's make it more.
Exactly. There's no way to prove it. Exactly. Did you by stopping someone getting killed on the road prevent that person from pushing the red button that blew the world up?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was actually going to make it even.
It's the whole Final Destination thing.
It is yes. I was going to even make it
put
more
off one
simplified.
thing and it's meant to happen. It's going to happen down the road.
Like for example, let's say you get a prophecy. Let's say you get a prediction from a source you can confirm, and you have full confidence that the prediction's correct. Let's say that that there's someone you know who is going to die in a car accident tomorrow, and you call them and be like, "Don't get in the car, and just stay home. Call in sick. Just stay home all day. Don't get in the car." And they do that, and they stay home, and then the next day they get in the car and they go to work and nothing happens. You'll never know whether or not you actually predicted something, because you did successfully prevent it, and that precludes the any kind of information we could get that there was viability there.
Well, we've done similar things. Like Michael has told somebody that their cousin was going to kill them. Try to kill
well,
themselves.
we talked about that in the previous one. Well, what I was going to say was, there is confirmation sometimes, because it only in the small things generally, because like I say, the bigger things nobody really takes any notice of them, unless you're. Well, no one takes any notice of us. So, like this woman said to me one day, wrote to us, I think, and she said, in the session you asked me if my husband had a heart problem. And I said, no, I don't think so. Well, I took him up to the hospital, and his artery was like 95% blocked. And they had to do an operation on him, otherwise he'd be dead, she said. So if I hadn't taken him up there, he'd probably be dead.
So there's definitely...
You can
interfere.
The effort. Why? Okay. Why are we doing what we're doing? We're doing it to help others.
Right.
Right.
It's an effort. It's not easy to help other people. You know that.
Oh yeah, they don't usually want it.
Most of the time, they don't want help. No, exactly.
They don't want the help. Well, they don't want your kind of help. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But if they're seeking you out, we're acting as an agent for a higher purpose. That's what we're doing.
Right.
We're being a conduit for higher people that can see better on the other side, people that are living on the higher realms. No point, we don't communicate with people on the lower realms except, some of the stuff we do on the TV shows, because that's
the direction Zach wants to go.
They don't take us to churches to communicate with the Pope. They're taking us to hoping we'll communicate with Richard Ramirez, who happens to be there because he knows what's going on. Obviously, he wants the limelight. He wants to.
Any attention he can get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So of course he's going to be there.
Yeah.
And we're up for it. If we see him, we'll let you know he's there.
Right.
I lost my train of thought. So what I was saying is, if you're acting as I'm not letting him channel through me. I can see him and I can hear what he says, but he's not going to get channeled through me. I was okay doing it with the guy that was murdered by Dorothy Puente because he was a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Dorothy Puente.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I could see her, but she wasn't going to come near me. See what I mean?
No, that'd be very dangerous. You
well,
wanna...
I don't need it. There's no point to it. If the person's not crossed over, they've not crossed over. It's as simple as that. And no point trying to talk to them.
Right.
So I'm only communicating with. I have a higher purpose. I'm interested in the higher purpose behind it, the healing, the help. That's all I'm doing it for. I didn't start this with Marti to do TV shows. All that has come to us. That's not why we began it. They told me to do this work, and I told them I would. So that's it.
That just helps us get out there so that people can find us.
We do it because it helps people see us, and hopefully they'll realize what we're doing is real. I can't speak about other people's stuff,
No, I mean, I think that's the same story we have too. I mean, I obviously didn't become a bishop with any intent, or a minister even, with any intent to become some fixture on a television show. It was really, just sort of happened, and I saw it as an opportunity to perhaps destigmatize spiritual problems and make it more comfortable for people to seek help, because the help does indeed exist, but it's kind of like a lot like rape. It's one of those things that people don't like to talk about, so they'd almost just rather deal with their trauma than actually actively seek help for it in a lot of cases. And so I thought, well, maybe if we were more open, if the church in particular was more open about talking about things like demonic possession, people wouldn't be so, reluctant to actually discuss the issues that they're having, and then they'd be more capable of getting help. So I'm on your wavelength completely. I completely get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
What you were just talking about. That's a great subject, because although I don't really talk about it much, I do know quite a bit about the darker aspects of things, and possession and things like that. Some of my friends who I studied with used to go and do exorcisms on places,
Right.
And get this. Yeah, there was a in England they call them off licenses, where you buy liquor. Here you call it a liquor store.
Right.
So there was this liquor store just a few doors down from on the corner of the block where my mentor had his premises, and these people that owned the place were about to sell out and leave because of the commotion that was going on in their living quarters above the liquor store.
Mm-hmm.
Every night they'd hear this yelling and commotion going on.
Right.
And they could both hear it and were aware of it, and it was happening every night, and it was driving them crazy. They were scared. They didn't know what was going on. So my friend, who was a mediumistic, he went in there, and he saw these two guys having a knife fight. And he got them out of there. He managed to get them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he did it, because I never asked him. I should have asked him what took place, but I never did. But he cleared it out. He got rid of them. And then he found out through the newspapers that two men had a knife fight and both killed each other in that liquor store.
Mm.
Before it was a liquor store.
Right.
So
Interesting.
they were still at it.
Yeah.
And that happens with trapped people.
Yeah.
People that are stuck don't know they're dead, and they just keep going through this motion over and over and over.
They get stuck in the raw emotion of the moment.
Yeah. They don't realize they're dead. It's a loop. It's like they get stuck in this loop. It's like suicides. You know, people, they hang themselves from the barn, they drop to the floor, they think they're still alive, they go back in the barn, they climb up, they get in the rope, they drop to the floor, they think this, and it just goes on and on and on and on till something breaks the loop.
Yeah.
Till some intervention takes place. And that's a very strange karmic state of affairs when people are stuck like that. You know, it's an odd thing. It's like their evolution's held up, and karmically maybe there's a reason for that. You know, maybe they have to go through that for some reason. You know, maybe the soul needs to understand something on a deep level. But possession is an absolute thing. It does take place, and
oh yeah,
there's mild possession and there's full possession. And my God, you know, I'll tell you a little incident with my teacher.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
He was an investigator in all kinds of psychic phenomena back in the 20s and 30s, mostly in the 30s, I think. Mm-hmm. And you know what? There's a place called Borley Rectory, which was Aleister Crowley's. He lived there, and after Crowley died, the place was infested. Crowley used to have black masses regularly in different locations.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he was quite the character.
Oh yeah, he was, and he was very, very dark. Mm-hmm. And there was a place. He even had a home he owned up on Loch Ness, and so did my mentor. He owned a place on Loch Ness as well. And interestingly, that place burned to the ground. Crowley's place, not long ago, a couple of years back.
Yeah, I think I heard about that. Yeah, the burning down of.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, Borley Rectory, my teacher went in there with a few friends to clear it out, because that's what he was able to do. He was able to clear places. He dealt with possessions and you know, infestation of lower astral stuff and black magic and all that. And so he went in there, and knives and bottles appeared out of nowhere and were hurled at him and his friends, but he was very advanced, so he was able to protect himself and his friends. Mm-hmm. On a, you know, this is something you'd see in a movie, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And he told us that when it was all over, they literally shoveled up wheelbarrows full of broken glass and knives that didn't exist in the house when they went in there, and dumped these wheelbarrows full of bottles and knives out. And there's actually a photograph of a brick that was taken a few days later by a builder hovering in the air at Borley Rectory, because the energy was so intense there, you see, still residual stuff.
Right.
Now, one of the other things my teacher did was, he told us a time where there was this very sensitive man. I think he was a poet. He was a well-known poet and writer. And a black magic group had abducted him and taken him to North Africa to use as a medium in a black magic circle. Mm-hmm. And my teacher found out about this and got together with a couple of his associates. And this was a summer evening in London, in an apartment building, like on the 3rd floor or something. The windows were open. It was warm, you know, very warm. And he said they began their process to help this man in, I think it was in Morocco. They knew where he was, and they were going to free him. And they started up with their ritual to, you know, whatever they were doing in there. And all of a sudden the temperature dropped to below freezing. And then he said a wind started up in the room and began to howl. He said, and the curtains were literally at 90 degrees, and things were flying around the room. There was, things were flying off the wall. There was just stuff flying around everywhere. And this went on for hours, he said. And nothing hit them because they were protected psychically, so they were just locked in for hours. He said, and they were up most of the night, and then it all just died down and stopped. And then a few days later, the man arrived back in England, and they were able to meet with him, and he described what happened. He said he had been abducted. He'd been kidnapped, basically, and he was taken to Morocco, and he was being used as a medium in a black mass. They were trying to invoke a very dark entity.
Oh my.
And at the height of the black mass, the head black magician dropped dead.
Oh my.
And
Well.
everybody panicked. They all freaked and panicked and ran, and he was able to escape.
Oh my goodness, what a story. My goodness.
Be careful what you mess with, kids.
So
Yeah.
and I'll tell you what happened to Crowley. So Aleister Crowley, there was a man that I met who was another person connected to my mentor, and he worked in the what do they call it, special branch in London, which is like the FBI, kind of.
MI5
like
special branch.
Yeah, special branch, like
Intel. Yeah.
they're the
Gotcha.
top cops, right?
Mm-hmm.
They deal with lots of very intense cases and stuff like that. And he got his hands on the file, which was secreted away. It was what's the word? I can't think of the word of it. Like top secret viewing only, right?
Classified.
Well, classified. I couldn't think of the word. So it was highly classified, and he got his hands on it because he was fairly high up in special branch, and he told us what it said. And basically, Aleister Crowley was found with his head shoved down between his shoulder blades, with several vertebrae crushed.
Oh my goodness.
Like someone
they didn't
just
know what,
hammered him.
Like someone had took his head and shoved it down between his shoulder blades and crushed his spine.
Like a whack-a-mole.
Yeah, like a whack-a-mole, yeah.
Wow.
So several vertebrae were just crushed. Now they couldn't figure out how this had been done. He wasn't hit on the head with anything. It was so bizarre that they covered it all up. They hid it away, right?
Yeah.
And here's what happened. There was a white magician that was known to my mentor, and Crowley wanted to kill him. So he sent someone round as a workman, a pretend workman, to this man's house, under the guise that he was there to look at the gas meter or something like that, whatever it was. There was something he needed to get in the house and look at. So the man let him in. And when he went in there, he planted an object in the house, hid it secretly, so that Crowley could gain access to the house through that object. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Someone informed, I think it might have been my teacher, informed this man of Crowley's plan to kill him, and told him to look for the object and then protect himself, destroy the object in a certain way and protect himself. And that's what he did. And he formed a circle. He put himself in the middle of the circle, and he did a special ritual where he a certain point, he destroyed the object and protected himself. And then the next morning, Crowley was found dead that way. And it's obvious to me what had happened. So Crowley's invoking all this energy, right?
Right.
And of course, all the energy travels through your spine. So he's invoking this energy. He's directing it at this guy, and what happens? It rebounds.
Yeah.
It rebounds on him, and it kills him.
A ricochet effect.
Ricochet, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
How fascinating.
That's what happened to Aleister Crowley, and there's only a handful of people on Earth that know this, and I'm one of them.
Absolutely fascinating. We are talking with Michael and Marti Parry. Sister Mary Joan is with us, looking at your questions in the chat room, and we will be right back. We're at the top, a little past the top of the hour. Don't go away. We've got so much more, and we're taking your calls. Call in now, get into the queue, and we'll take your questions. We'll be right back.
I'm falling down from the sky and from the ground. Up above, just like below, and I don't know where I should go. I'm stuck in limbo. I'm falling down from the sky and from the ground. Up above, just like below, and I don't know where I should go. I'm stuck in limbo. I'm stuck in limbo.
Welcome back, everyone, to Vestiges After Dark. I am talking with my guests, Marti and Michael Parry. Sister Mary Joan is with us as well to add to the conversation. She's looking at your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll be getting to any of them on the second half of the show here. Also, we would love to hear from you. Give us a call instead of chatting at 516-453-0138. That's 516-453-0138. We want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, your stories. If you have a question for our guests, just don't ask like readings. Don't ask for readings. They're not doing readings tonight, but anything else about their work is fair game. We'll be right back in just a moment. You know, before we went to break, we were talking about Crowley, and you know, he was known for being sort of a medium, in a sense of conjuring or communicating with inhuman entities. And so, I'm curious, if in your work, have you ever come across something that is legitimately a demon in your experience? Have you ever encountered that directly?
I would say I have, but it's something I won't talk about because I don't want to put it out there. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
But
But you have.
Yes, I would say yes. I had a vision of it, and it was pretty strange.
Yeah.
There are you know, how do you classify a demonic force, or you know, what is it that people are talking about when they refer to it? You know, I mean, is it human? Was it ever human? You know what I mean? I tend to think that maybe millions of years ago, maybe it was human. But if you've been dark enough for so long, you cease to be human.
Or you don't have any humanity left.
Well, you cease to be what you would be called human. You know, I mean, what is? Once something is so dark, you know.
I tend to agree. I mean, I agree with
coming back from it.
I agree with what you're saying there, Michael, because you know, in my work, I've developed. This is not something that's industry standard. In fact, the industry standard is actually quite inadequate in terms of how I think the conventional churches deal with this type of phenomenon. But you know, being that I'm an independent and operating through an autocephalous administration, we are able to sort of think outside the box and work outside the box, which gives us, I think, an advantage with helping people because we're not limited by, you know, rules and boundaries that don't really need to be there in the first place. But part of that also required me to develop a model that was a better, I think, semantics for working with these things that we typically call demons. But, you know, there's a lot of confusion as to what that word really means. And you kind of alluded to it there when you're like, well, what do we mean by this? And so I have 4 categories that I used in my classification system when I'm doing assessments with clients. And my audience has heard this probably to death, but I'll mention it again because you might not have ever encountered it before in our conversations. I don't think we've ever talked about it. But I have 4 categories that we look for in our assessment process. And so there are 4 possible types of demons. And very briefly, the first category falls into the context of what I consider to be a true or genuine demon, in the truest sense, which is the Judeo-Christian's notion of a fallen angel. So this is not a human, never had been human, never had been corporeal. Perhaps the ability to create some corporeal characteristics or infect the corporeal world, but largely as a non-corporeal being. And, you know, in the Judeo-Christian sense, there's a little metaphorical story that talks about their fall from heaven and all this stuff. That's just, I think, a way of trying to explain these ineffable things that happened in prehistory that are so far beyond human comprehension that there's really no way to actually explain the story correctly or accurately. So we have this little story that kind of makes general sense to us that something happened and this is the result. And those are always typically the hardest ones to work with. So anytime I've encountered that, which is very rare, thankfully, we know we're in for the long haul. This is something that's going to be weeks, months, even possibly years to resolve, just because of the severity of it. But that's really the only one out of the four categories that I would say is a true demon. The second we classify as elementals, but not all elementals are oriented towards what would be the demonic side of the spectrum. If you're looking at it energetically, there's low vibratory energies and then there's high vibratory energies that are, you know, more celestial versus that spawns out of the darkness. And to my understanding, elementals are at the behest of whatever is. They are intermediaries, and they simply channel the energy one way or the other. Yes.
So if an elemental is constantly being fed negative energy, of course it's going to be destructive.
Yes.
It doesn't, in a way, doesn't have a choice in the matter. It simply is. It's a part of the Earth's psyche, if you like.
I like that because it's like,
you're fed.
Yeah, it's really, you're talking about essentially a sentient non-human thing. We can call it a spirit for lack of a better word. That is not
consciousness.
But yes.
Yeah,
it's energetically oriented towards either the two primary or primordial conditions of the cosmos, which is creation and reabsorption. I don't like calling it destruction because destruction implies it's something bad. Reabsorption is more accurate to what I think it really more functions as. But our experience with it, because we tend to be oriented towards the creative side of that vibration, anything that we come in contact with that is of the reabsorption principle tends to create a negative effect on us. We experience it as demonic attachment, perhaps. And then there's two other categories, which kind of gets into, I think, what you were talking about, and definitely very much in line with what Crowley did. And the third category we have in our assessment protocols is called created, and this is the one I see the most. And this is basically a thought form, a tulpa, an egregore. Something that is generated through occult power. But what people don't realize is that does not imply that it was like a dark ritual. We have the power within our own minds to create these out of our traumas, out of our hatred.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
thought forms exist. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And thought forms possess people.
Yes. Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's where you get these things like the Wraith and what's the Skinny Man one? That one that was real popular a few years ago. That's how these things manifest, is through people, their fear, and they all think about it, and boom, next thing you know, people are having sightings.
Exactly. It can be a group thing. It can be a singular thing.
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't go away. It has to be, whatever's created has to be reabsorbed and transmuted back to its original potential. And that's part of, a lot of people just don't understand that. You're creating something, and now you have to reabsorb it and transmute it back. Yeah, we're all little creators.
Yeah,
and we're using God's energy, and you know.
Well, I would go as far as to say that when the scriptures talk specifically about being made in God's image, it's clearly not referring to our physical appearance. It's talking about our ability to actually create in the same way that He does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the third, and that's what I would say is probably the most common one that we encounter. And then the fourth one was to the point that you were talking about. And that is, we call wrathful spirits. It's just a term we give to give it some consistency. But these are the residual energy of human beings that were either so traumatized, so evil, at least in their behavior, so negatively oriented, and have built literally a foundation upon themselves that is just this negative reabsorption energy, or what we would classify or experience as evil, and that could go on for literally thousands, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, as long as it has a source to feed on, to maintain cohesion. And that is typically another type of demon that we see. Now, in the experience, in the human experience, I'd say all four of them, all four categories are demonic, because they all can cause possession, they all can cause attachment, and they all make their victims sick. And it really, the classification is more for my sake, because what the cause is, the causation of the event, determines my solution. I do not come in all guns blazing with exorcism on an elemental. Typically, I don't need to do that. I don't necessarily need to even do that with a thought form, although sometimes I do. In wrathful spirits, almost never is exorcism required. It really can be resolved in different strategies. Some of it that we in our church, this is again part of the benefit of being outside of the conventional system. We use Sister Mary Joan calls it folk Catholicism. But what it really comes down to is essentially these additional aspects of spirituality that sort of melded into Christian culture through the old ways. And so some of it might be, you might classify it today as a variation of magic or witchcraft, although I would say those are stretches, and I don't like using those terms because, again, the negative connotation that's part of it. But there is definitely an operation that is occult in nature that can be very beneficial and very useful towards resolving some of these other types of situations. So I'm curious, in your work. And then I got a question from Marti that I don't want to run out of time on. I want to definitely get her perspective on this. But Michael, I'm curious, in your work, do you come in contact with thought forms often? Because I'm always encountering these things more than any of the other kinds.
That's a good question, because boy. Let Marti talk for a second while I think about this.
Okay. I can actually ask Marti. I can ask you your question, because I don't want to miss this opportunity. But I know that you're known for doing the portraits. Have you ever? Are you able to also get visions of perhaps locations that you could paint? If like something was missing and somebody told you, they're trying to convey a message of where to find this particular article. Would you be able to perhaps generate a landscape or a picture of a room or a house where this thing could be found?
In sessions, I usually do like the portrait. I'll do a portrait, but I also do what I call my doodles. I have a page of these little vignettes, I guess you would call it. Mm-hmm. They're like little visions, and some of them have been locations. And when we've worked with the police before, I have drawn things that had to do with locations. So that's part of it. It really depends on what the people on the other side want to give me.
Right. That's fascinating. Yeah.
I do ask for things like that. When we were talking to the FBI guy about the assassination, I drew a building with a big wall around it. like a compound.
Mm-hmm.
And that was actually where it happened, wasn't it? So.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get. I don't. Sometimes it's not real specific, but it can be.
Right.
You know, I've gotten, like the name of a street.
That's interesting. So the information can be quite diversified. You never really know exactly what you're going to get, but you're able to sort of collect it all and put it down into some kind of like a scribble. You just kind of like jot it down.
I think it's more than a scribble. I draw little pictures.
Okay.
I have like a page of all these little pictures. Like one person, I did a whole page, and they had no idea what it meant. You know, I did like a ring with an inscription on it, something to do with Hawaii, and I don't remember all the rest of them, but she didn't understand any of it. Like a year later, she went to her friend's wedding in Hawaii and met the love of her life. And
so it's like you get little screenshots.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
and
just
like little puzzle pieces.
Little meaningful little things. You know, it could be something, a memory, or it could be a future thing. It depends on the person. It depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
But yeah, when we've dealt with trying to solve a crime, I've drawn things to do with the locations before, like a certain scenery, like a certain, I see a hill or whatever.
Yeah.
Back to your question about thought forms.
Yes.
Thought forms, it's a very interesting thing, really. When you think about it, like the time we're living in right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
With all this COVID, right?
Right.
So
that's an egregore of itself.
Thought form. Yeah, there's a thought form being generated around this.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And it's anytime anyone uses fear on you, it's not coming from a good place.
Could not agree more. I could not agree more.
It's as simple as that. So there's this huge thought form around this entire thing being created, and I feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I'm feeling this thing. It's like
I think we all do.
It's like a heaviness. It's in the air.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
Something's
yeah. I feel it every single day.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to it.
It's
Yeah.
not right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's how I would allude to what you're talking about there as thought form. It's not a person, obviously. It's an amalgam of energy that is coagulated into a particular form.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's permeating everywhere. I mean, I have lots of friends that are sensitives or mediums, and almost every one of them is suffering through some real bad depression and anxiety right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And they have no doubt that this is what it is, because you can only hold off that bombardment of negative energy for so long before it starts to break down your walls. And so I've got quite a few friends right now that are in some deep depression, and they don't know how to get out of it. And the first thing I'm telling them is get off social media.
Yeah,
that's right. I haven't been on there for weeks now. It's just.
I understand why.
Yeah, because I know what I'm dealing with. It's as simple as that. So.
And see, that's your advantage. Most people don't know what they're dealing with, but you being educated and more in tune, you know how to defend yourself against it. But most people out there are just being slapped around and don't know how to defend themselves.
You know something? I think one of the biggest things that people don't understand, and if they could just understand it, it's very simple, but it goes over people's heads, because it's simple. learning to attach and detach from situations, from things, from
people.
People,
particularly people,
from your thoughts. Yeah, from your thoughts, you know?
Yeah.
It's a very important thing to switch off and switch on at will and not be pushed around or, you know, shoved around by other people, by what's on your TV. You know, it's not, detachment is not unfeeling. It's simply
not letting it affect you.
You're not letting it affect you, exactly. It doesn't mean you're shut down. It just means simply that you have to, you know, you hear a lot of psychics say, I can't switch it off. It's on all the time. I'm bombarded night and day. And I think, shut up. You haven't learned to detach.
Michael's not too.
You know, you don't know how to detach.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
And it doesn't make you any more special to be doing that. I don't think about spirits all day long.
Yes.
Why would I?
Yeah.
Unless they got something really important to say.
Yeah. And
if they did, are they going to tell me something that everybody's going to listen to? Probably not.
Right.
Most of them, if I said, oh yeah, the meteor's going to hit next week, who would I tell?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. President, can I talk to the President? I've got a very important message for him. No, I'm sorry. Who are you? Bugger off, or we'll send the Secret Service.
I think in order to get that kind of attention, you have to be more fraudulent than you are.
Right.
You're right. Oh my God.
It's the same in my work. It's no different.
We figured that out years ago. Why we aren't as, I guess, well known or, you know, in the limelight is because we, you know, won't conform to whatever everybody else wants us to do.
Yeah.
You know, it's most of the people that, you know, have sold out.
They're performers. They're not real. They're performers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you'll see actually on their websites that they're actors and actresses.
Yeah, they'll say this is for entertainment purposes only. You know, and that's exactly their intent behind it, is to entertain. They're not doing it because they're serious about the work. They're doing it because, you know, it's sometimes lucrative if you can dupe a whole bunch of people and become famous for it, you know. Sister Mary Joan, I don't want to ignore the chat room, and no one's called in on the switchboard right now. So if you want to call and talk, now's the time. We'll take your call, 516-453-0138. But we can take questions from the chat for our guest tonight. Did you see anything that caught your eye?
I've got one from Laura. I kind of answered it real quick, but I'm sure a more in-depth answer would probably be beneficial for her.
Sure.
So Laura Hamilton asks, what about people purchasing dolls that have attachments off the internet? They all get together and talk to the attachments on Skype. Is this dangerous? Well, it's basically like doing a seance, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I've never really gotten into this attachment to inanimate objects. I mean, why would a spirit or, you know, a demon, whatever you want to call it, attach themselves to an inanimate object that, you know, that really limits them?
They wouldn't.
I don't know.
They
That's
wouldn't.
Me.
And you're right on that.
I've never.
Not permanently.
Well, they don't really at all. There can be sometimes an attachment to an object that is in proximity to a target when you're dealing with, again, that's why those 4 categories of demons are so important, because it talks about their behavior and what we can anticipate, so that we can always be one step ahead of them and be able to more, you know, quickly resolve the problem. But no, Marty's completely right. They wouldn't attach themselves to a doll. So, you know, what is Annabelle, for example? You know, The Conjuring 3 is coming out here on Friday, and, you know, Annabelle's sort of like the poster child of that series. So what is Annabelle? And I would say, getting back to the thought forms, that's exactly what it is.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I was going to say to you.
Yeah.
So what is being built up here? This whole idea, this thought form. around Annabelle.
Yeah.
That's
And
what
you-
Satan created.
And you know how you can release that is just send love into it. That's what I would
That's
do.
exactly
Take
right.
Annabelle's head off and
Then the head will come at you.
Well, let me tell you an interesting
I'm with
story.
Michael. Take the head.
Let me tell you an interesting story from the set of Conjuring. I did consultation for Conjuring 3. And so I was on set for a few days for the things that they needed me for. But we also get into conversations because I was brought in on the day one of shooting to bless the cast, crew, and the set. Even some of the sets weren't even finished being built yet, but I still went in
really
there
cool
and
to
blessed
see.
what was available. And the reason they asked me to come out was because, well, first of all, it's a tradition in this movie series. They've always had a priest come out. But this particular time, they wanted an exorcist, which is how they called on me. And so I started talking about, with some of the individuals there about their experiences. And it's fascinating to know that, Annabelle, the doll that's used as the prop, and there's several of them. There's not just one. They have several for different things. There's one that is actually can be very articulated, and there's some that are just sort of stationary. Depends on what they're using it for in the scene. So there's several of them, but there's a primary one that is used, and this and one of the actors on the previous installment, not this one, but the previous installment. Was doing a scene where Annabelle was in a room and she was put down on a chair. Now, keep in mind, I don't know if you've ever been on a movie set, but it's a sterile environment. When that bell rings, it's like drop dead silence, and if you make a noise, they pretty much want to kill you. There's no opportunity for somebody to be like walking around while they're shooting and playing pranks and stuff like that. That's just not going to happen. They're very serious about the work. So
right.
In this particular scene, the actor had to go back and forth between this room where Annabelle, the prop, was. And every time that she would go back to that room, Annabelle would be on the bed. She would have moved from the chair to the bed. Nobody put her there. She would end up there, and they could not explain it. There were other things that were going on that made people very uncomfortable. But the fact is that many of the actors and cast and crew reported that Annabelle, the prop, did a lot of weird things. Now, this is clearly a doll that was created as a prop. It has no occult history whatsoever other than the fact that it's a movie prop. And yet the energy of people watching this thing and the icon that it has become, because Conjuring is now this big series, has influenced and created a thought form that has attached itself and planted and almost animated this doll sentiently. And that's exactly what's going on here. So I actually ended up blessing Annabelle because, again, this is something that was making the cast and crew uncomfortable. And I found it fascinating. And this is not the only horror movie that I've ever, where I've talked with the producer, where they have had...
Yeah, Danny had some stories.
Danny
Danny
Draven can tell you some stories. Maybe we'll have him on the show sometime. He does a different, like, sort of like these really bizarre horror films. And he'll tell you these things, they create energy. So it's all thought form. Obviously, it's not conjuring demons. So the big misconception is that, when you imitate satanic worship, you're actually conjuring real demons and you don't know it. No, you're not.
No, that's all. Most of that, 99% of that is just nonsense. It's thought forms.
Yeah, it's all thought forms.
Yeah, well, I think that thought forms are, usually involved with the poltergeist actions too.
Yes.
It's usually so often they have a teenager living in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and that their hormonal, chaotic is causing it, because
that was what we ran into in the Fontana case, right, Bishop?
That's exactly right.
From
yes.
what we could find.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that unfortunately never got to really see our part of the investigation with Fontana. You know, the GAC went in and they filmed the episode and brought us in as an afterthought, really. I think because the family, if I recall correctly, requested us to come in, and so he I
believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and so they came out and they just shot the fact that we were there, and I think we were only on for like a few minutes at the end. But you didn't get to see our investigation because we went in and things started to happen there. The film crew had already left because we were working with the family for several hours beyond even what the film crew was committed there to shoot. They got their shot, and they were just, you guys, at that point, it just became like a normal case for us where we were just helping the family. And we didn't need to have the film crew there for that. They didn't intend to put that into the episode anyway. So they went on, and after that happened, all sorts of other bizarre things started to take place. But I don't think there was anything there that was genuinely demonic. I think it was thought forms that were being generated by the older daughter, because they would.
It wasn't even there.
They probably do it subconsciously, but it still comes from them.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And it is subconscious most of the time, and that's because we are not really aware of just how powerful of a being we are, what we're capable of, what we can do.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. You say you go in and bless people, and that's just like what I was saying. I put in love. It's the same thing. Blessing and love.
And that is a blessing. I mean, when you go and you project a thought form of love, or however you manifest it, that is absolutely what a blessing is. There's no difference, and it has the same effect. Anybody can bless anyone in the same way. Try this. I'd like to tell the whole audience, and for all of you guys already probably do it, but when you're out there in the public, and you're walking around, make a mindful effort that everyone that passes you, to give them a blessing. And all you have to do is just have the intent to give them love, project love into them as you're walking by. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to look at them. Just project an aura of love and watch the magic happen. You'll be surprised at how dramatic that has of an impact on the situation.
Even if they're complete idiots. Yeah.
Yes. Especially if they're complete idiots.
Even more if they're complete idiots.
Because they need it more.
Right.
Marti and Michael, the chat room is talking about the Hat Man and the shadow figures.
And shadow people.
Yeah, what do you think about shadow people? What are they?
I think a lot of it is simply people not being able to see clearly.
Yeah.
It's their Uncle Fred that they can't make out, because they got their blinkers on.
Well, actually, because people see shadow people or whatever, usually out of the corner of their eye, right?
Yeah.
It's always peripheral.
You look at it as fun. That's because your thinking mind kicks in when you look at it. When you see it out of the corner of your eye, you're not thinking. So you know.
Yeah.
There was some studies done, and a certain degree of your peripheral vision is outside of your conscious sort of scope.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you always hear people say, out of the corner of my eye, I saw my dad or my mum standing over there, or whoever it was. And then I looked around, I swung around to look at them, and they were gone. Well, all of a sudden, your eyesight, you now got them in your main vision, if you want to look at it that way. It's not in your periphery anymore.
Right.
It's in your physical vision.
It's more in your direct vision.
Gotcha.
So you're seeing it more directly within a certain 90-degree scope.
Yes.
And your peripheral is now it's not in your peripheral anymore, which is governed by your subconscious, which is you're able to see, because your conscious mind's not interceding, saying, that's not there. You know.
Yeah.
Ignore that. That's
Yeah.
That's not real.
Right. Yeah. The logic tries to take over.
The logic takes over, exactly.
Yeah.
And logical people have a hard time with this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's very true.
Not because they're any more logical, but they simply don't realize that the logical mind is a prison.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Now there are, I've actually seen a dark shadow, let's say, that was very palpable, and it was malevolent. But
well, it's dark. I mean, they're not all sunny and they're not wearing their best clothes. I mean, they're dark. You're not going to see them. You're not going to see them like you see Uncle Fred and Auntie Lily. I mean,
it was more
dark.
Negative energy. It was. It
of
hadn't
course.
formed.
Well, negative energy isn't bright and rainbowy. You're going to see. Dark shadow people. Ooh, what you been watching? Well, I was watching horror movies all week. Well, you're going to see dark shadows then, aren't you?
Well, see, the thing is, it's like theologically, there's actually a foundation to this. You might even compare it to, or might even have, not to use a crazy pun, but it might shed some light on it. I mean, the fact but theologically, the church actually would say philosophically that evil really doesn't exist. Evil is merely the effect of the absence of the good, in much
light.
The same way that
it is the absence of light. That's exactly what it is.
Darkness doesn't exist. Darkness is just what you have when there's no light. And so
that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wonder if these things are emanating, because they can't emanate from the vibratory states of creation, which would actually be produced. Because think about it. Even the way the books of the book of Genesis was written metaphorically to sort of describe the metaphysics of what we're talking about right now. And when God says, "Let there be light," that's the mark of creation. So it's really like the darkness void. The void is just sort of the neutral. And let there be light, and he makes creation, and then the scripture says, and it was good. It always makes it a point to refer to how this was good. And I think what that's really getting at is this idea that everything that we consider to be good or aligned to creation or aligned to more of higher vibrations or celestial emanations are, of course, going to resonate at a frequency that shows that they are luminous. There's a luminosity to them, where darker negative vibrations don't have. They're devoid of that energy. They're devoid of that.
That's right.
Yeah. So they can't reflect it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me. Our work, your work, and our work is so similar. It isn't even funny.
Right.
People would think they create these divides, in the convention, in the conventional arena, where it's like, mediums, you can't, you shouldn't talk to them, you shouldn't work with them, you shouldn't deal with them. So you have these fundamentalist Christians that think this way,
bullshit.
evangelicals think this way, and not all of them, but most of them do. And even in the church, in the Catholic Church, which is a little more open-minded and a little more grounded in many ways than some of the more, like I said, fundamentalist denominations, they still very cautious, don't like talking about, would never work with one, even though they really should, because it's kind of important in this work. And if you don't have that natural ability, then you need someone who does. And it really comes down to, when you really break it down, it's just two different models for the same reality. That's all it is.
We're on the
That's
same
right.
team.
You know something?
Yeah.
There was a medium in England who was on TV a lot, and he died not long ago. But a lot of nuns used to disguise themselves and go see him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's something about Catholicism that I like, and I've always liked the saints and the mysticism of it.
Yes.
Lots of saints used to levitate. I have a whole library of books and I sometimes read them, and there's this monk, and he's going in to see his friend, and he's floating in the air, and he's surrounded by light, and there he is, just hovering in the air.
Yeah.
As you do when you're praying,
Yeah. The ecstatic visions. Yeah. I mean, Catholicism, as well as Orthodoxy to a certain degree as well, or actually, in some ways, I would say Orthodoxy might even be more so mystical. But I think what you are attracted to, and same thing for me, it's ultimately what attracts me to this particular form of Christianity is the fact that it has an allowance for mystical reality. There's a supernatural quality to it. It's not just going to some bland church, listening to some preacher yell at you. There's actually more going on here that is at a much deeper, higher, not always conscious level. And I think you're definitely, that resonates with you as it does with me. And, it makes perfect sense. But
well, there's a lot of magic and mysticism in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
People just think that's just then, or that was just them, or that was just Jesus. But Jesus said, you can do everything that I can do and even more.
Yeah.
So why don't they ever listen to that part of it?
Because they only listen to what they want to hear, and that usually their paradigm dictates that. It's the same thing in politics. The reason why you don't have good communication in politics is because people are so lost in the paradigm, they can't even possibly fathom that there's other ways of thinking about these things.
Well, it's also the leaders don't want them to know that, because then they're giving power to the sheeples.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right.
You can't have that.
No, and the church has operated like a political structure for too long, so it's absorbed, unfortunately, so many of those bad habits, and that's what you see, at least administratively. It's not really like that at the personal level. I mean, I've known a lot of Roman Catholic pastors who are just awesome people, but once you start getting into that higher level administration, which is basically just a office job that just happens to have something to do with church and religion. It's just like
I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch the series The Young Pope?
I did not. I heard about it. I heard good things.
I've heard of it.
I have not seen it.
It was so cool. It really is. It was a surprise. It was really
I'm going to have to go look that up
show.
now.
Yeah.
It's very mystical.
Yeah, it's mystical and actually very cool.
Well, we'll have to look it up. But you know what? We're at the end of the show. 2 hours goes by like that.
Are you serious?
I'm telling you, it's a time vortex.
Michael and Marti, I could talk to you guys all night.
One day we'll meet up and have a whiskey.
Absolutely.
Oh, my God, that sounds wonderful.
I'll open up the Bullmore 18 or something good. Michael and Marti, go ahead and very quickly, if you could tell the audience how they can connect with you and find out more about your work and maybe even employ your services.
Okay, the best way to find out everything you've always wanted to know about us and more is to go to our website. It's www.spiritart.com. Very easy.
There you go. And yeah, thank you so much. But, well, you guys, I want to have you on again. So if you're willing, I'd love to schedule another date at some point in the future.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Next time I'll try and do some sessions, some connections with people.
Oh,
That's
that'd be
wonderful.
fantastic. We would love that.
Yeah, I really, I wasn't kind of ready for it today, so next time we'll definitely
Understood.
do that, because I did it with a lady not long ago. She was doing a show in England, and I didn't realize it, but it was to do with suicides, and that's why they were doing the show. And I saw her uncle, and he told me he was with his son, and then she revealed to me that that's why they were doing the whole show, because of his son's suicide.
Wow.
Her mother's brother, it was, that was talking to me, and I said his name. I said, well, he's standing here, his name's such and such. So we can definitely do this. I'd like to do it. Be a little bit of fun. Let's see who shows up next time.
Awesome.
You guys are always fun.
Thank you so
Love
much.
y'all. Take care. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Sister Murray Joan. Thank you to the audience who participated in the chat. We appreciate you all. We'll be back next week with a brand new Vestiges After Dark. So check us out, and we'll see you then. Take care. God bless everyone.
Seconds. 10 seconds.